And I think that you were talking about being transparent with the members and the fans, as the custodians of the club, and obviously as members we want to be able to enjoy and bask in the success of the club, but also go through the troubling times as well and come out the other end. And let's address the elephant in the room right now. Let's get to it, Bruce, because it's probably the most disappointed I've heard you speak in the media in anything that you've said in the media before, and that continued on this afternoon on radio when we heard whispers probably leading up to this point, and there's always rumours when it comes to A-League and transfers and player movement. But then when the news did come out, and it was later on last night that James Troisi was leaving the club effective immediately, can you talk that whole process through? Obviously, don't break confidentialities, but tell the members what you can.
Yeah, look, I think we can be very honest and pretty clear with that whole situation. So, post-hub, post the season finishing, we had individual meetings with all the players. We were in an environment where we didn't know when next season was going to start. We didn't know what the distribution would be from the TV rights money, which the cash component from Fox Sports had been cut in half, and the deal was no longer a 3-year deal. It was back to one, finishes 30 June. We had a full roster of players, so the numbers just didn't stack up. So we took the view that, okay, some of these higher earners, we're going to have to let them go because we just can't afford to keep them. You know, we're not saying that this player, they're no good, get out. We're not kicking them out the door. We're essentially saying we actually can't afford to keep you, as is the situation right now. You know, Qantas doesn't want to stand down its pilots. Its pilots are no worse today than they were a year ago, but the planes aren't flying. The revenue's not coming in. Tough decisions sort of need to be made. But we had a cordial chat. It was good. Nathan was there. James was very understanding. This is back in September. October 5, we sold Riley, we sold Lachlan Brook, we sold, who am I missing? Paul Izzo, Nikola Miliusnic went to Denmark. So all of a sudden, things changed pretty quickly. Some of the higher earners were now gone. We have accrued bonus revenue, if you like, revenue that we weren't expecting. So the club's position changed. Because the only reason James was told you are free to speak to another club is because we can't afford to keep you. Come October, the discussion was, we can afford to keep you now. And we need to keep you. We don't have Riley. You'd play number 10 under Gertjan. He played like an 8. Riley played more like the 10. So we were very clear. I spoke to him. Carl spoke to him on numerous occasions. And it was all fine. It's October. November, all fine. Earlier this month, there were some stories coming out. And late November, Western Sydney Wanderers sent us an email. Hey, you know, Troisi's shopping himself around, but we don't want to approach him, so we thought we'd ask you guys. So we actually had we have a football meeting every week, so we discussed in the football meeting. And we were adamant, like, no, he's got to stay. So we responded to them in writing. No, James is a required player. We'd appreciate if you didn't approach him. Yep, no worries, fine. So then as the whispers started to get a bit louder in the last few weeks, I had direct conversations with him. You know, look, you know, why are these stories coming out? Some of them are relatively accurate on some of the detail. It was pretty clear that you know, the reporter was getting some decent information. So no, there's nothing in it. You know, I know Carl Robinson from way back, the Wanderers coach, but there's nothing in it. You know, blah blah. So then when we got the email from his father on the weekend asking for a mutual termination, you can understand the disappointment in one, the timing. Two, like we had friendlies in Sydney last week. I was on Thursday speaking to James about an article that had come out on the Tuesday last week. He's like, nah, you know, these people, they always write stuff, you know, there's nothing in it. No. And I know James really well. I emceed his wedding. So, I played with him in Turkey in 2008. So it's not like I'm just talking to some random player. So when he's telling me there's nothing in it, I'm like, okay, there's nothing in it. There's rumours and stories all the time. So to get the email on the weekend was extremely disappointing. And, that's fine. They want to mutually terminate. And we had a meeting, I think it was yesterday, another football meeting about it. And we decided, look, if and he really wanted to go. It's not like, I want to go. I've been at this club playing before thinking like, I want to go. I left twice. Always came back, but I left twice. But, there's a way to leave a club. The day we signed Riley, we specifically said, we don't want to see you here in 3 years. Like, we want you to leave. So there's ways to do things. This is certainly, in my view, not the way, hence the disappointment. But that's the story. So when he says, like, when you hear, the club gave him permission to speak to other clubs, yes, that's true. That's a fact. The club also said, within 3 weeks of that discussion, that he was a required player. So in a year where things change quickly and you have to be nimble and there's constant uncertainty, there's going to be changes.
Well, one more on that before I move to Carl, your thoughts. I found it pretty convenient that the announcement came out and then 17 hours later he was announced as a Wanderers player. And that happened very quickly. So from a fan and a member's point of view, this doesn't come across as something which has taken 48 hours to happen. This has been happening for a while, and from what the CEO has just told us about the brand values of the club, that no matter what James has decided to do and follow that path in his football, there is then now a clash of values and where they align.
Yeah, they're misaligned, and that formed part of our decision to let him go, but it just adds to disappointment. I mean, we have consciously made an effort, and I know we sat here last year, for those that were also here last year, and we said a lot of things. And I'm assuming, because I've sat where you guys have sat before, and you hear a lot of things, and you're like, yeah, it all sounds well and good, but let's see what they actually do. Actions speak louder than words. But I think through our actions over the last 12, 15 months since the last member forum, I think no one can argue that we haven't promoted youth. No one can argue that we haven't tried at all cost to bring South Australians back. No one can argue that we haven't been trying to promote South Australian players. So, if James was some Brazilian foreigner that was, only here for a short period and was going, the feeling would be very different, The fact that it's a South Australian born and bred, someone we really targeted to bring back. It was a massive coup for us to get him back. That cuts a bit deeper, mate. A bit deeper.
And I think it does. I think you're right, because the journey the club's been on of bringing back South Australian players, and I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody, but the opportunity to get James over the past couple of seasons was something which is quite exciting, because he always destroyed everyone that he played against him. He was playing at Victory and playing for Socceroos. So to have that, and then it puts us in the position where we are now, Carl. There's 2 weeks until the season starts. Obviously, international players aren't going to come in because of what's happening with COVID, and we potentially have 2 weeks to find a replacement player. But if they're from somewhere around Australia, that's going to take time. It's not an easy fix. So Bruce has expressed his disappointment as a coach. I'm sure you're feeling the same.
Yes, most definitely. I had a chat with James yesterday morning. He came in and see me and explained his reasoning. I told him I was disappointed. I'd had many a chat with James in this pre-season and let him know how important he was to our structure and to going forward. And there was a lot of private conversations on how I wanted him to play and a lot of private discussions about signing players, bringing players to the club that I had with James. So I was a little bit disappointed. I sort of understand where he's come from a little bit, but being an ex-player. But at the end of the day, I'm disappointed that it's 2 weeks before we start the season that it's taken that long for him to make that decision, I suppose. Because I don't think we can replace him. We can't find an Australian player to replace him, but it provides an opportunity for another younger player that we've got in the group that we'll promote. So, it's disappointing at the moment, but it provides an opportunity for someone else.
Well, I do want to talk about the youth program in a moment. If you do see the Wanderers announcement, ladies and gentlemen, just have a really close-up look to see what shirt he's wearing, because in the Wanderers announcement, he's wearing an Adelaide United shirt. So if anybody's great at Photoshop and they want a job at the Western Sydney Wanderers, I'm sure you'll be a shoo-in. So good luck with that. But as you said, Carl, it provides an opportunity for a young player to step up. And that's what I think, personally, I've loved seeing in your coaching tenure. And I think COVID's provided a lot of stresses for so many people, but it's also provided opportunities. For young Australian players to get opportunities, and now young South Australian players. So, Bruce, I want to ask you first, and then to probably all three of you. Like the youth structure now, it seems like it's stronger than it's ever been.
Yeah, look, it's something that we've focused on. A big thing for me was that we need to have a full-time head of youth. Previously, the youth team coach has been part-time, and whilst we have been promoting youth team players, the program was a little bit all over the place. I mean, the training was good, but there's got to be more to it than just that. I know bringing Ayrton in will make a material and significant difference to the program, the way it's set up, the organisation, the way the players are brought up. Like, for me, my dream is that one day, if a player's been through the Adelaide United system, through the youth team, through the first team, and is playing in Europe or South America or wherever they might be playing, that people can recognise that they've come through Adelaide United, not just because of the way they play, but because of the way they act, the way they carry themselves, the way they speak to people, the respect, they follow the values that Nathan ran through earlier. So that's impossible to do with a part-time coach. We needed to restructure that program to get the connection between the A-League and the youth team. So having Ayrton as head of youth and assistant A-League coach, which is the setup, I would say 80 to 90% of other A-League clubs have, is crucially important, because he's at A-League training in the morning, speaking to the A-League coaches, he's in the meetings, he's seeing the trainings, and then he's executing near on exactly the same thing in the youth team. So as a youth team player, if you're the left back and you're called up to A-League training, it's not some big change of style or way of playing. You can actually be comfortable because you know what your midfielder's going to do when you get the ball, because in your team, in the youth team, they make the same movement. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but if the principles are aligned, then you're already halfway there. So that restructure was critically important, not just for the development of the players, because when it's not aligned, it's always the players that suffer. Gertjan, you say all the time, Lockie Brooks doing really well at training, but I go watch him play in the youth game, and his pressing is nothing like what I want him to do in an A-League game. So I can't trust him to press in an A-League game or to do the job that I need him to do in the A-League game. And Lockie would come to me and say, I feel like I'm doing really well at training, but I'm not getting a chance. And I'd explain to him, the head coach is saying you're doing really well at training, but he watched you play on the weekend and you're not doing what he would like you to do in an A-League game. So it is a bit sad to see the players suffer when the alignment's not there, but we definitely have that fixed going forward.
And then speaking of younger players, Nathan, Bruce mentioned Nicola and Paul, who's not probably on the younger side anymore. Riley and Lockie, they all go to different clubs. And I think here in Australia sometimes for people who are probably part-time football fans don't pay too much attention to the business of football. They look at it and go, oh no, we've lost a player. But the fact that we can develop younger players, or if they've had a bit of experience and then spend a lot of their career here, and then turn that into making something for the club, which is really important. Can you talk us through that? Because I reckon when Riley moved on, there was group of people who would have gone, oh no, but then a group of people going, how good's this for the club and how good is this for Riley?
Yeah, aside from the financials of it, when sort of go into that, and that can come and go depending on the time of year and where they go and all that sort of thing. But I think reputationally, it's really good for the club. To borrow a term from another club, I think it starts to create a public sort of expectation or persona of the club as a destination club. Players want to come here because they know they'll get the opportunity to develop and they know they'll get the opportunity to go overseas. And all of a sudden it kind of snowballs, and I'm no expert on international transfer markets, but Adelaide United move on 4 players in a COVID environment. Next window, when clubs are looking at Australian players and they see the success that our players have had overseas since moving and the quality of Riley and Nicola and Paul and Lockie, all of a sudden we know we can trust that program. That's a club we want to deal with. They're players that we want in our program because we know the quality of what they produce. And I think it would be remiss not to mention, the common thread with all of those players was that they came through our youth system, and specifically under the guidance of Carl and also Ayrton at Football South Australia. I think that I don't want to lose sight of the work that's been done prior to Carl's appointment here, and Michael Carter should be congratulated at FSA for that as well. We've got a really good underpinning program in our NTC that we will now work even more closely with to mirror a lot of the philosophies and football principles that Bruce spoke about with respect to our youth team. We want that flowing all the way down. They're not necessarily Adelaide United players, but they're on the path to becoming Adelaide United players. So, there's a financial benefit, no doubt, and it provided the club with the necessary protection through COVID, but I think the reputational value of it cannot be lost.
Do you then, Carl, see that as what Nathan just said, but then I guess your experience with youth players and then being able to communicate to senior players and international players, and how old would Dom Costanzo have been when you were playing A-League? You would have been 3 years old or something?
Yeah, I can remember the first couple of years of the A-League of Dom running around the change rooms as a little kid. Wasn't interested in soccer at the time. He was more interested in getting the tape off the physio and taping himself up to look like a mummy.
That's good. I find I listened to an interview that a famous coach of college basketball did. His name's Coach K, and he coaches the Duke College side. And basically, ladies and gentlemen, he's been coaching this side. He's in his 70s, so he's been coaching the side for about 40 years. And he got offered a job to coach the Los Angeles Lakers for $40 million, and he turned it down because he just wanted to connect with these younger players. And the reason I'm saying that is because the thing that stood out, Carly, said the message should never change, but the way you communicate it needs to. So you can still instill your philosophy to players of all different ages and experience, just as long as you can communicate that with a mix of extreme youth at Adelaide United. You've got some international players and some senior players, which are sitting over there we'll talk about in a second. Do you find that that's something that you need to do?
I believe it doesn't matter what level of football you play, you have the same problems. So it's just a matter of how you deal with, as you say, older players. I will speak a little bit differently to a younger player, but I'm quite a relaxed coach. I like the players to express themselves and be free to speak their minds as well. And
how have you found that over, I guess, last season finishing up, which was a very unique way to start your senior coaching career, but it was, we talk about success. It was a great start, obviously, with what was going on behind the scenes, but now you've got a team which you've been heavily involved in, now moving into what we can call an almost real season. During pre-season, what's impressed you?
Look, as you said, I was very impressed with the playing group, the way that they bought into my style in those 5 games in the hub, because we didn't have a long time preparation into those games, and the way that they changed and the way they adapted to the way I wanted them to play was exceptional. And as you said, this pre-season, it's been a very different pre-season to normal pre-seasons. I think last pre-season we played 12 games, I think it was, before we started the A-League season, and this year we're going to go in with 5 games. So it's a very different pre-season. So it's going to be interesting to see how the first couple of rounds of the A-League, of how all the teams in the A-League, how they play with their fitness and their style of play. We've been building on from that hub of my style of play, and the players have been tremendous so far in the pre-season.
Bruce, I love what Nathan said about Australian coaches with the success, which was right in front of us on the presentation. How beneficial do you think that will be, having Carl here, not only his history with Adelaide United, but the ability, we probably take for granted, but it's a big issue, the communication breakdown sometimes when you're trying to communicate with players and do the other activities of the club. However, having an Australian coach in Adelaide who has such a brilliant reputation with the Adelaide United Football Club, again, before we even take to the field, that is a brilliant way to connect with the team.
It is fantastic, and it makes my job much, much easier. I don't have to educate him on the salary cap. I don't have to educate him on the other opposing teams, the players, the stadiums, all the sort of challenges we had last year. So it frees up a lot of time to do more important things. But look, Carl is a fantastic human being. I think that's first and foremost. That's sort of like our key indicator. Once you tick that box, then obviously he's got all his coaching credentials, and we all saw what he can achieve just in that short period in the hub. So, Carl makes my job much easier, and the fact he's a good communicator. He's happy to do events like this. He's happy to speak to the media, as Nathan said. I get rolled out quite a bit in the media, but I think over time you're going to see that change as Carl starts to do more and more, especially as the season commences.
And Carl, you bring experience and relationships into your assistant coaches with Ross and Etten. What can you tell us about them that we don't know?
I think everyone pretty much knows Ross. And that's a reason I brought Ross into my coaching style, because he's very passionate. He's a winner. And he develops great relationships with not just with the playing group, but the staff and the supporters as well. And that's, as Nathan said, that's a big thing for us going forward. And Ayrton, he's got a tremendous knowledge in football. So I like to pick his brain on football. He has a tremendous knowledge, and as you said, he hasn't played at Adelaide United, but he has played in the NSL for West Adelaide. He's got a good knowledge in Australian football as well. We will talk about the leadership group very soon. Nathan, COVID, it's affected everybody. Bruce, you used the example of the Qantas pilots before, and everybody has been affected when it comes to redundancies and pay cuts. Nathan, on the club, from, I guess, an outsider's point of view, if we're looking at sport holistically, and here in South Australia, if we look at the 2 AFL clubs in the Crows and Power, the AFL was affected in a dramatic way into staff cuts and cost cutting. There was a moment where I thought with Adelaide United, and especially the A-League, because we are quite a smart operator when it comes to finances, and there's not much to play with compared to the bigger clubs, there didn't seem to be many moves that needed to be made or people needing to go through as tough a times as those in other codes. Can you talk from a staff and a player's point of view about how tough it was getting through what has been a weird 2020?
Yeah, we joke that we were well prepared. We were prepared for COVID long before it hit in terms of our resourcing. We didn't have to make one person redundant within the office staff. We've made some structural changes within the office, but no material headcount. I think it's actually maybe gone up in recent months. The major challenge for us in that first window, so from 24 March, probably until the hub kicked off, was really the trigger and I think that was we started training mid-June. I think in that window, it was the uncertainty that was really the concerning aspect. And I think that was the biggest fear for the players as well. There was a lot of talk around pay cuts, and obviously the players took a significant cut to play in the hub. And speaking with them and looking at our finances, that was obviously an issue, but it was what lays beyond that was really the fear. What happens next year? The Fox deal at the time had been significantly reduced. There was contracts on foot. COVID was there. Can we have crowds? Can we drive membership revenues? Will our corporate partners come back? We've got through that now, not without significant challenges. I mean, a lot of our staff had a significant period of time off. And it's not necessarily holiday time when you're sitting at home worrying about whether you're going to have a job when you come back. But we've bounced back, I think, relatively well. I have to acknowledge the playing group and how they've conducted themselves throughout this. A lot of difficult discussions we had and difficult decisions that were made, but they've been professional throughout. And I think that speaks to the culture within the team and what we spoke about earlier. The challenge now is still COVID. Obviously, we've had some restrictions around the stadium capacity, which we released today, which was really exciting news that we're at 75% or 12,500. But the club, the major cuts, I think, were football excess. So I think the A-League had grown beyond its means in terms of the football programs were, in my opinion, excessive. And there was a lot of spend in areas that weren't necessarily driving outcomes. So, and to be brutally honest, part of that is a foreign coach. It's no secret that foreign coaches earn more than local coaches. And as the slide showed, it doesn't necessarily guarantee success. So we rebuilt our football budgets. It's something that Bruce and I were looking at daily for probably 3 months, just trying to make considered decisions on what's material and what is a nice to have. And I think we've arrived at a position, and we speak to the players about this as recently as this afternoon, we've arrived at a position that we haven't compromised the football program being short or long-term success, but we're in a position that we're sustainable, and now we need to move forward and hopefully get some big crowds at the stadium and get members back on board. We're hopeful that today's news gets a lot of those that were maybe querying, and if you haven't or you've got friends that haven't renewed, we'd encourage you to do so, because it looks like, particularly for that 3 January game, we'll have a really big crowd in.
And Bruce, you're dealing with the players directly. There could have been, I think COVID's probably brought out the best and worst in people, so there's that time of panic, misunderstanding, there's then understanding and just getting on with it. Like, I'm sure the players went through the motions a little bit, but it seems like they went to the hub when they needed to. They understood that everyone was affected by COVID and got the job done on the field, and then can come back now and focus to the next season.
Yeah, look, I think considering all things considered, I think the players were exemplary, especially in the hub. But there were tough conversations. I mean, it's no secret they got stood down. They were just on JobKeeper for months with no, like, if you think back to March and April, like, there was no vision, it was just flying in the fog. When are we coming back? I don't know. Does our contract still stand for? I don't know. Like, there were 1,000 questions. I didn't have an answer to 20 of them. So it was particularly tough. I mean, I think March, April was particularly tough, and the players were really good, really good. I mean, I felt really bad for them, because wasn't that long ago I was a player, and I was thinking, Jesus, this was happening to me. Because at the end of the day, they're just young men. They're not seasoned veterans who have been in combat or something. Like, they're just young men with young families and mortgages and all the same stresses that everyone else has. So it was a very difficult period for them. But I tell you, we've got a really good group, really good culture, and they came through with flying colours. And I think that's what also helped us when they went to the hub.
And everything seems to be new. I want you to tell us about some of the new players that we are going to see before we get on to the leadership group. So what can we look forward to seeing?
Yeah, there's a number of new players. We've got some exciting young players, some players that the general public probably don't know very well. There's always one or two youngsters that surprise people and do well. I think we'll see that this season. And people say, he's come out of nowhere, but actually the kid's been practicing since he was 7, So there's people who've done a lot of hard work to finally get the opportunity, and obviously we got Harvey Lopez and Tommy Urich who will be here at the end of the week, early next week at the latest. They're quarantining in Perth because, again, COVID reared its ugly head about a month ago here in South Australia. So the challenges remain, but I think we've got a strong squad for next season. I don't particularly want to talk about individual players that we've signed, But I think what we've put together is a decent team that will excite you all for the coming season.
Carl, is there a standout who's going to be our first choice keeper? Because this is a position that we probably haven't found ourselves in before. We've distributed so many keepers to different parts of Australia and different parts of the world, but only as recently as a few days ago there were discussions of it. It's not decided yet or where we're at. So you and Eugene have got a pretty tough job ahead of you.
Yeah. I think we pretty much know where we're going with the number one at the moment. James played both games last week in Sydney, so at the moment he'll go into the season starting as our number one. He's a young keeper. I think he's 21 years of age, so it's exciting. He's has huge potential, and again, it's very difficult for goalkeepers to get a start in the A-League because most coaches want an experienced goalkeeper. They know they aren't going to make mistakes. James is going to make mistakes, we know that. But long-term future, if we get games into a young goalkeeper, there's possibilities that he can then go on and to bigger and better things.
Because we have a spot spare now in the squad, is Eugene a chance of just tapping you on the shoulder and going, I'd still be the best keeper in the A-League if I played him? Have you had that chat?
You're just looking to play up front at the moment, so...
Let's talk about the young leadership group. We've got a rising star in our championship year and now leading the club is Stefan Mauk. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause, please, for our new captain, Stefan Mauk. He's alongside Jordan Elsey and Ben Halloran. It's great to have a young player getting the opportunity, and it's something which was earned and not just given to him. How did that process take place, and what leadership attributes do you see in Stefan Mauk?
It was... when I got the job, I thought it was very important that we had a South Australian leading the club, just to get and keep in touch with our values. And we had a discussion, the football department had a discussion, and Stefan he has exceptional leadership qualities. You can see that the way he goes about himself, the way he prepares himself to play, the way he prepares himself to train, and just not that, all the other things that he brings to the change room and onto the pitch. So that was a discussion that we had, and we decided that Stefan was the man. We've got Jordan that's been at the club a long time as well, that has done extremely well. So he came into the leadership group with Stefan, and Benny, we've made him an honorary South Australian. So he's with his experience overseas, and that he has a lot to bring to the young players in our squad as well.
It is very exciting. It seems like they've all got those leadership qualities all over their certain areas of the pitch as well. So if one is unavailable to wear the armband, the other one can stand up